If you want to make money reselling, you have to know where to find the good stuff. And trust me, where you source can make or break your profits. After nearly 8 months of selling on eBay, I've tested a bunch of sourcing methods and heard plenty of hype about others that I haven't tried yet. But is there one method that beats them all, or one that's secretly sabotaging your business? Let's break down the pros, the cons, and find out what's really worth your time. Hi, I'm Taylor Jo, and as I just mentioned, I started reselling on eBay back in October 2024. Right now, since it's summer, I am a full-time stay-at-home mom, and I'm doing this basically just to make a little bit of extra cash on the side, and it's actually kind of fun, so I'm having a great time with it. This channel is for my fellow resellers, side hustlers, anyone that is looking for a super cool and flexible side hustle to bring in a little bit of extra income, or if you just like watching somebody run a small business from home, you can also sit with us. Feel free to subscribe. I'm gonna break this video up into 2 parts. Sourcing methods I have tried, and then the research I've done on sourcing methods I haven't tried and I'm super curious about. Let's get started. So I wanted to start with the most common, probably, sourcing method, which is going to be thrift stores. They're probably the most reliable sourcing method because not only are there tens of thousands of these in the US alone, so there's probably one near you, but also they're open 7 days a week, all year round. And whether it's mainstream like Goodwill or a local business, they're getting new inventory daily, which increases the chances that you'll find some high value items. And aside from a few obvious exceptions, thrift stores don't typically limit what they sell. So if you're an everything seller, they can be a one-stop shop for all kinds of inventory. And okay, don't fight with me on this last pro. I know some thrift stores recently raised their prices. Goodwill. But for the most part, thrifting is actually a relatively affordable way to source. It could be worse. It really could. But let's get into the cons. Obviously, my first con is going to be that some thrift stores are insanely overpriced to the point where I wouldn't even buy some of these items myself. And I'm not even talking about Goodwill. I've been to some local thrift stores where they charge $15 for a pair of Old Navy jeans. To make matters worse, if I'm specifically referring to more mainstream thrift stores, Goodwill, some thrift stores actually take their free inventory and they cherry pick it to find all of the super high value stuff and put it on their own reselling website. Now, while they have every right to do that and they are one of the biggest reselling businesses in the country, it definitely belongs on this list of cons for sourcing methods for other resellers. And lastly, because thrift stores are the most common place to source, you're gonna have to deal with some competition. Have you ever driven past a Goodwill at about 10 a.m. and noticed that there's a line of people out the door? That's your competition. And again, that's okay because everybody has a right to do that. It just, again, belongs on this list of cons. My personal experience with sourcing at thrift stores has been kind of the same as all of my others when it comes to it's a hit or miss. It's definitely where I started sourcing most of my initial inventory, and I've definitely spent a lot of money on bad inventory at thrift stores, but that's my own fault. Will I continue to source at thrift stores? Absolutely. But I have to be honest, I'm probably gonna source at Goodwill less and at my local thrift stores more. I am lucky enough that my local thrift stores actually have really good prices and they don't cherry pick the good stuff, so I can get my hands on some of that high value stuff that we're all looking for. My one exception though for shopping at Goodwill is shopping at the Goodwill Bins or the Goodwill outlet, which is my next category for sourcing methods. It took me longer than I care to admit to realize that I have one of these within a reasonable drive from my house, but literally only one. If you don't know what I'm talking about, there is an outlet version of Goodwill stores where they basically take inventory that had a hard time selling at the original Goodwill stores and they just throw it into bins and they charge by the pound. Now, some locations actually take donations directly at their bins, and the location that I go to does do that. And that does make a difference because if you have a Goodwill outlet that doesn't directly take donations, you're literally getting the absolute worst inventory at these bins because it's stuff that people passed up several times in other Goodwill stores. But anyways, the obvious pro to this is it is cheap inventory, probably the cheapest inventory you can find at any of the sourcing methods I'm about to talk about today. I don't really have any other pros than that, but the pros of it being cheap inventory is that you're gonna get a higher ROI. ROI stands for return on investment, which means that you're going to be making more when you sell the item than you normally would if you were to pay a higher upfront cost for it. What cheap inventory also means is this is a great place for beginner resellers to do their initial experimenting when it comes to buying items that you're kind of just unsure about or looking at comps for items because it's lower risk. It's Also a great place for bundling. If you find several items of the same type or the same brand or the same size, you can bundle them together and sell them as a bundle deal on eBay, which actually can be more attractive than a single item. And I just have to say, honorary mention for an honorary pro is it's kind of fun. It's like a treasure hunt. It brings me back to my like inner kid self where you're just like trying to find the gold. However, digging for treasure definitely has its flaws. Which brings me to the cons of shopping at the Goodwill Bins. The one that stands out the most to me personally is how dirty it is. By the end of my first trip to the Goodwill Bins, my hands were filthy, just like gross and sticky. Ugh. The clothes that I ended up picking up smelled awful. And honestly, the whole place just kind of felt dirty. And this might not be the case for all the Goodwill Bins or Goodwill outlets, but for me, the location that we have to go to, I feel like the chaotic, messy setup just kind of made the staff feel like, what's the point of even cleaning everything? But besides that, just in general, the bins are harder to sift through than they are when everything is on a rack in the store and you can kind of just fan your fingers through it. This, you're actually just like throwing stuff around and like digging in these bins to look for stuff. And as I mentioned before, this belongs on the cons list. These are probably going to be lower value items unless your Goodwill bin store directly takes donations. I'm not saying there's no chance you're going to find a high value item at your Goodwill bins. I've already sold several items from my first Goodwill Bins trip, and I'll attach that video up here. And in that video, I talk about my experience with Bin Bros. Because there is a narrow chance of finding those super low cost, high value items at your bin stores, you're gonna have to deal with Bin Bros. It is just a comedic term that I use to describe resellers that break the rules to get their hands on the good stuff. Things like grabbing things out of the bins before they've been put fully on the floor, stealing stuff out of other people's carts, and just being blatantly disrespectful to other shoppers are all characteristics of a bin bro, in my definition. And you know, just like other sourcing methods, it's just high competition. That's basically all I'm saying. And the last disadvantage of this sourcing method is the locations are very limited at the moment. Depending on where you live, you might have to travel very far to get to one. In fact, I live within a metropolitan big city area and we only have one store and it takes me 45 minutes to get there. So I have to decide whether the cost of travel and the time it takes to get there is worth it. Consider yourself a lucky reseller if you live near one. Unlike the Goodwill Bins, there is a type of bin store that is popping up all over the country. I'm talking about the Amazon and Target return liquidation bins. If you don't have one near you, just wait. You probably will soon. As online shopping continues to grow, so does the return culture that comes with it. So retailers like Amazon and Target are overwhelmed with returned, excess, or just unsold inventory. And rather than process each item individually, many of these goods are liquidated in bulk. That's where bin stores come in. They buy these pallets, they dump the contents into bins for customers to dig through at steep discounts. It's chaotic. Yes, but for resellers, it can be a goldmine if you know what to look for. So, like the Goodwill Bins, most bin stores use a flat rate pricing model, which makes them a potentially low cost place to source inventory. For example, one of my local bin stores closes every Thursday to restock, and then on Friday, everything in the store is $12. On Saturday, everything is $10. On Sunday, it's $8, and so on and so on. Until on Wednesday, everything in the store is $1, and then they close again on Thursday to restock, and the cycle resets. So you get to decide how much you're willing to pay for the good items depending on what day you go in, but the chances of you finding the better items happen on the most expensively priced day. Unlike the Goodwill Bins, however, you can often find brand new sealed items. And because you have the chance to buy like super brand new items, I feel like one of the other pros, again, is that it's fun. It's like a treasure hunt. And comically, the store that I was just talking about is actually called Treasure Hunt because it's that fun and everything inside the store is like treasure themed. Just like the Goodwill Bins, however, you are going to have high competition. You're still going to have bin bros. Oftentimes, these places are dirty. The items are filthy. You are going to walk out with dirty hands if you are sifting through these bins, no doubt. But the worst con is that I would consider the bins to be high risk, because even if you have a box that seems to be sealed, there might be something completely broken, damaged, or defective inside of it. And some bin stores don't even allow you to open the boxes to see if what you're buying is intact and works. I don't even know if I would recommend going to a bin store that does that, because I just feel like that's unfair and kind of scammy. The bin stores that I go to, you are allowed to open the boxes, but you have to do it away from the bins, and you can bring a adapter if you want to plug something in and see if something like an electronic works. But despite these cons, I'd highly recommend checking out your local bin stores if you've seen any of them popping up. What I've noticed personally is that some run much better than others. I have a ton near me, and some of them are run like a well-oiled machine, and some of them are like probably going to shut down at some point because they're run so poorly. But they're all worth checking out at least once. All right, on to the next. A sourcing method that I've recently begun dabbling in because it is summer, the weather is nicer outside, is garage sales or church sales or community yard sales. Basically any sale that is happening in your community where residents of that community are selling their stuff. Garage sales are fantastic places to source because usually the items that you're buying are really cheap because people are just trying to get rid of their stuff. The last thing they want to do is at the end of their garage sale have to take everything to a donation center. So a lot of times you will run into people who are willing to sell high value items for really cheap. Also, most individuals don't search comps on items before putting something up for sale in a garage sale. So that's a good thing for us. That leaves us able to negotiate a really good deal. Which brings me to my next point is that garage sales are negotiable with pricing. If you shop at a bin store or a thrift store, the price is set. You don't get to say, hey, I'll give you $1 for this. At a garage sale, you absolutely can negotiate. Notice how I said negotiate and not haggle. There's a difference. If you don't know what the difference is, find out what the difference is. I think one of the reasons why resellers get a bad name is because some resellers do haggle because they're like, oh, I'm never going to see this person again. I'm just kind of squeeze them for everything they're worth and try to get, as low price as I can from this. But deep down, just think about how that makes you feel as a person. If someone is like, I absolutely will not sell this item for less than this amount, then don't try to haggle with them. They might have an emotional attachment to the item. Another great thing about garage sales is that along with negotiating, people are actually willing to sell you things in bulk for a bulk price. I just recently at a garage sale a few weeks ago, this guy had, I think 100 plus very, very nice, great condition, high-end golf polos. I knew which ones were going to be worth it, but it's not something I would pay $5 a shirt for. So I ended up picking out 30 of the shirts and he gave them all to me for $50. And he had them originally priced at $2 per shirt. So it saved me, 40 cents a shirt, which gives me a higher ROI. So I'm happy about it. And I've already sold several of those. So I already have actually made my money back and I have tons of shirts still left. So it's free inventory at this point. Another pro that's worth mentioning about shopping at garage sales is that you don't have to pay any sales tax, which speaks for itself. And lastly, garage sales are actually a really great networking opportunity. And I don't mean networking for a job. I mean networking for potential sourcing connections. If you're feeling comfortable enough and you bought an item or several from a garage seller and you're looking for specific items in your niche, don't be afraid to tell them you're a reseller and don't be afraid to ask them if they have any more of whatever it is, because this could lead you to a really great sourcing opportunity. And again, you're never gonna see this person again, most likely. So even if you say, hey, I'm a reseller, and they say, hey, screw off, it's not that big of a deal. That brings me to my first con of selling at garage sales is that there are reseller haters. I personally have not experienced anything like this on my own garage selling, but I also just started doing it this summer, so I haven't had a lot of opportunities for someone to hate me. But of the garage sellers that I have told I'm a reseller, most of them are like, oh, that's so cool, can I see your eBay store? But sometimes if you're, shopping at someone's house where they are selling their personal belongings, they might have an emotional attachment to their items, which can cause them to be really upset when they sell something to someone that they know isn't gonna love it as much as they do. I almost didn't list this as a con because I think that it's actually pretty rare, but it's still worth mentioning as a reminder to always be respectful and mindful when buying directly from individuals if it's their personal belongings. Just like the last few methods, although there'll be less of it, you are going to have competition at garage sales, but it's more of a timing situation. It's going to be the early bird gets the worm. So if you have a garage sale in mind, don't show up in the middle of the garage sale. Get there at 7 a.m., 8 a.m., whenever it starts, and start sourcing, because if you don't, you probably are going to miss out on the good stuff. One of the two most frustrating cons about garage sales is not only are they seasonal, so they only happen at certain times of the year, but they're also weather dependent, and they start at the rainiest time of the year, at least on my side of the country. Like, it's really rainy here in April and May. So when garage sales start, oftentimes what happens is that they end up getting pushed out until the next weekend, which might be a time when you wanted to shop at another garage sale. So these garage sales overlap each other and you cannot be in two places at once. So I have personally found that to be very frustrating. I feel like I've missed out potentially on good garage sales because I went to this one and found nothing when I could have been at this one all day and maybe found something, but can't do that to yourself. You have to just chill and realize that that just wasn't your day, and that's totally okay. And the second of my most frustrating cons about shopping at garage sales is that they're so hard to find. Unless you're driving around all the time and you just get lucky enough to see that community yard sale sign, a lot of them don't post online. And of the ones that I've noticed do post online, there are so many posts of garage sales that happened weeks ago. Like, people forget to delete these posts off of Facebook or off of whatever website they're using. And it's incredibly frustrating when you're like, oh, there's a garage sale this weekend, and then you look at when it was posted and it was a long time ago. So my question for my viewers is, if you have a secret way to know where all of the good garage sales are in your area, please let me know, because I've just been relying on word of mouth. My mom drives around a lot. She tells me where they are. Sometimes she'll get lucky and find one on Facebook and we'll go to that, but it's so frustrating. I wish I just knew exactly where all of them were happening every year. And lastly, I think a huge disadvantage of garage sales is the travel time and travel cost. When you're in a garage sale, you're likely using your car to drive around, and even to get to the garage sale, you're driving, and sometimes you might drive really far and end up with nothing. My mom and I thought it would be a good idea to go sourcing at garage sales in the community that is definitely in a different wealth class than we are. And we drove quite a ways to get to this community and we found nothing. But it was nice to look at the big, beautiful houses while we were there. My personal experience with shopping at garage sales, like the first time, I got super lucky. It was in my parents' neighborhood, which is 5 minutes from me. The weather was spotty, so I think that caused a lot of people not to show up. So we didn't feel like we had much reselling competition. And I was able to find something at almost every garage sale to flip. And I feel like it was like a beginner's luck situation, because since then I have not been successful at garage sales. So again, just like every sourcing method, it's hit or miss. I think garage sales require a lot of luck. If you don't want to drive around and source at garage sales, there's another way that you can go shopping in your local community without having to leave the comfort of your couch. And that is going to be online community marketplaces. I am referring to things like Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, Nextdoor. I don't know if OfferUp still exists, things like that. The best place about these is that you can source remotely. You only need to leave your house if you're already committed to buying an item. There's also an endless selection of items on these marketplaces. Like, you could be scrolling for hours and hours and not see the same thing twice. Also, just like garage sales, these are a really good networking opportunity. You might meet up with somebody, again, you bought a certain item from, be like, hey, if you have any more of these, especially if you are someone that buys collectibles. I actually just bought a bunch of new in-box, like, vintage Elmo toys from somebody, and when I got to her house, she was like, I have more, do you want them? I was like, yeah, like, just sell them to me in a bundle. She knew I was reselling them. She actually wished me luck. Anyways, I made that pros list super short because, in my humble opinion, there are significantly more cons than pros for sourcing on online community marketplaces. My very first one is that it is actually a reselling platform. So it is hard to find someone who has underpriced something on Facebook Marketplace. A lot of people are using platforms like this to resell. So chances of you finding something that you could actually flip are pretty low, unless you're like a furniture flipper or something like that, where you're putting a lot of work in to enhance the item before flipping it. It's just really hard to find low cost stuff. Not impossible though. I'll put a picture of it on the screen, but I found a word processor. I was able to talk this lady down to, I think, $35. I ended up selling this thing for $150 in like a couple of days. That was a super lucky sourcing opportunity. She just happened to be nearby somewhere I always go, and it was great. But I literally have not sold anything else from Facebook Marketplace since then. So the second biggest con, and if you've dealt with Facebook Marketplace in any capacity, you probably know exactly what I'm about to say. What is it with people on this app? Poor communication. People asking you if the item is available and then not saying a thing after you tell them yes. People saying they're gonna come pick up the item and then they don't, or people saying they're gonna meet up with you and then they don't show up. People saying they're gonna put the item out on the porch and then they don't. Like, I don't know what it is about specifically Facebook Marketplace. I'm sure this happens on other apps too. I just don't use any of them. But people on this platform just have the worst communication and selling ethics I've ever seen. In addition to that, on these online community marketplaces, you're gonna deal with a lot of scammers and a lot of bots. Just a good rule of thumb, I'm sure everyone that's watching this video has probably been scammed in some capacity, or not been scammed, but at least has noticed that someone is trying to scam them. If it sounds too good to be true, it is. If something is asking you for payment up front, no, just don't do that. If the person is asking you questions about your item that can be answered by just looking at the description of your item, I would ignore them completely because they're probably a bot. And if you put something up for sale and you have like 600 people asking you if it's available, a lot of those are also bots. So don't give your time to every single one of those people and respond and say yes, because you are not going to get an answer back from them after that. I don't know why. I don't understand what the benefit is of these bots or of these people that are doing these things. If someone knows the answer to that, leave it in the comments below. But this also leads me to the last one, which is, it is a huge safety risk sometimes. Another little bit of advice I have, general rule of thumb, always meet somebody in a public place. And again, never pay for the item until you can see it physically in front of you. And when I say meet somewhere in public, I mean in an area where there's a lot of people. You just really never know. All right, let's move on to online auctions or online liquidators that do auctions. The first sourcing method I ever tried was online liquidation auctions. I know that that's really weird, but it's actually the thing that kicked off my reselling journey. To begin with, somebody at my husband's work told him about this website, and then he told me about it, and I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And then it was actually my husband's idea to start reselling. The auction thing sounded really interesting, and things were going for really cheap on this website. So I was like, heck yes, I'm gonna dabble in this. And despite a couple of pros, I have to say this before I even go into it, I would not recommend these for smaller resellers. I don't even know if I'd recommend them to any resellers, but I cannot recommend this for sure to smaller or new resellers. It absolutely put me in a hole. So a couple of the pros are obvious. You can shop from the comfort of your home at any time of the day. It's easy to sift through the items because you're just scrolling on a screen. And this is one you might not know of, but a lot of these websites have condition transparency, meaning that they will tell you if the item is new, slightly used, very used. However, these online liquidation auctions come with a lot of disadvantages. For starters, the fees are wild. On the platform I use, the lowest cost you could get out of on a single item was, I think, like $7. But that's not how it looks at first. You will bid on an item for $1, and if no one else bids on that item, you win that item for $1. But it's not $1, because after that dollar, you get hit with a $4 lot fee, which is also misleading because they're not referring to a lot like you're buying an entire lot of stuff. Like if you buy 15 things, that's not a lot. Each item is considered a lot for some reason, so you will be paying this $4 lot fee on each item. And then you're paying sales tax on that price. And then on top of that entire price, you're paying a 15% buyer's premium. So that $1 just turned into like $6 or $7. So think about if you were to buy a bunch of items off this website, and most of the chance you're not going to get the item for $1, just So you know. All of that 15% buyer's fee and the $4 lot fee on every single item, that is going to add up and it is not worth it. And to make matters even worse, it is super easy to get sucked into the bidding war. It feels like gambling. You get caught up in the thrill of winning items, which usually leads to overspending, and then you still have to tack on those extra fees. Take it from me. Like I just said, this is the first sourcing method that I tried. I thought it was going to be really easy. I was like, you know what? Because I'm just starting off and I'm trying to build my inventory. I said, I'll just buy stuff in like new condition. I will bid competitively and then I will sell for the lowest price I possibly can while still making a profit. This was obviously before I knew what sell-through rate was, and it's been 8 months and I am still stuck with like, I don't even know how many pairs of brand new shoes that I just cannot sell on eBay. However, if there's something you need in your personal life, it might be a good place to buy stuff like that. I was able to find a like $150 mattress topper for my daughter, and I think I only paid like $10 for it. So that was a deal, but not for reselling. Just avoid it at all costs. If you've had success with this type of sourcing method, please tell me in the comments. I obviously was only able to do this on one singular website. There might be other websites that do better than the one that I've done, but again, speaking from personal experience, you do you, I'll do me, but I'm gonna share with you what happened to me. So, all right, so let's move on to the sourcing methods that I've not tried yet, but really want to try. Like I'm very curious about most of these. Some of them I know are not for me, but some of these I definitely wanna try. The first one is going to be estate sales. Now, I'd be lying if I said I've never gone to an estate sale, but I've never sourced from an estate sale. I've actually only been to one. It just happened to be happening in the area where we were garage sailing, and we just popped in to kind of check it out and see what it was like. But it was like the last day, there really wasn't anything left. But since then, I've been on estatesales.net, just like hunting for an estate sale that would fit what I'm looking for, basically. And so far, I've been unsuccessful. Either they're too far away, or a lot of times with estate sales, they take photos of everything that's going up for sale. And so far, I have not been able to find anything that I genuinely would buy. So, but the biggest pro about estate sales is that they are always happening all year round. And if antiques and collectibles are your niche, estate sales are definitely where you want to shop. For obvious reasons, estate sales always have like vintage collectibles and antiques. It just seems to be like 90% of the estate sales that I see, if not more, that I see on estatesales.net, it's all antiques and collectibles. So if that is your niche, definitely look at estate sales for your sourcing method. And the last pro I have is that it's also a good networking opportunity, just like the other ones, but more of a networking opportunity with the estate sale company and not so much with the people you're shopping around. If you continuously go to the same estate sale company for your estate sales, you might form a relationship with them and they might be able to hook you up with some sourcing opportunities. I don't know. There's a couple of cons to sourcing at estate sales. I would say they're not great if antiques and collectibles are not your niche. Again, I have not been able to find a singular one that is not just inundated with antiques, and that's not my niche, so it's not gonna work for me. The second one is that it's kind of pricey. They're not really priced to sell. Estate sale companies tend to look at comps on websites like eBay before they price their items. Estate sale companies are a business. They're trying to make as much money as possible. So I have heard that estate sales are negotiable with pricing sometimes though, so this is not like a complete bummer. And lastly, just like some other sourcing methods, these are time sensitive. You got to get there early and be the first person in line if you want to get access to the stuff you saw pictures of online. Next up, we have liquidation pallets or wholesale lots. This is, I mean, basically would be, instead of going to your bin store, you do the same thing that they're doing and buy an entire pallet of like liquidated goods or a wholesale lot. The obvious pro here would be you're getting a high volume of inventory in one go, which means that you'll have a lower cost per item, and it's a scalable sourcing method for people who want to grow their business and for larger resellers. I also think it would be really good if you were a niche reseller because you know exactly what kind of lots to buy. You can buy an entire pallet in whatever category you like to sell in. However, it's a higher upfront cost. Some pallets cost thousands of dollars, so I would not say that these are for beginner resellers, especially because you need the space. If you don't have the space to put a pallet, pallets are not small things. If you don't have the space to put a pallet, please don't buy a pallet. Additionally, there's the cost and the hassle of just getting the pallet to your house. Some of them deliver, which is great, but a lot of them don't. Like, you have to figure out how to get there, have a vehicle that can handle the weight of a pallet and get it back to your house, and that's going to cost you some money. This sourcing method also has quite a bit of a learning curve. You have to do quite a bit of research on your supplier to build a connection with them and snag the good stuff, and you obviously end up with the risk of getting a pallet full of damaged junk. I feel like that risk alone is just what scares me from ever having to buy a pallet, but I genuinely don't have the space to buy a pallet. Someday, if I ever scale up, I think buying a pallet would be something that's really fun to kind of experiment with, but I think for small resellers, this is something you probably don't want to do. Also, of the pallet places near me where you can buy a pallet and go and pick it up, I've noticed if you look online, what they do is they put the MSRP of the total MSRP of all the items in the pallet, and then the price of the pallet is like 60% of that, which is confusing to me because I feel like even if all of the items in that pallet were brand new, sealed, and not damaged, which would just be like incredible, I still wouldn't sell them for more than 60% of MSRP, I feel like. So I just don't know if, I just don't understand how that price point is worth the hassle. But again, if you have experience in pallets, let me know, because I just really don't get the whole pricing thing. Anyways, moving on to a little bit more of a fun one, which would be flea markets. This sourcing method crossed my mind exactly one time. I Googled the nearest flea market to me, and we went there over the weekend, and it was the biggest letdown ever. This is not going to be the same with everyone. Some people, you guys have the best flea markets in your town, and that is great. The one that I went to was 90% counterfeit goods. And then there was a section way far in the back that had like antiques and stuff that might be good to look at, but I still didn't find anything there. However, after watching a interview with Tech and Sports, if you guys don't watch him, I'm pretty sure he's a like multi-million-dollar reseller. He is a hustler, like just really knows what he's doing. He has a lot of experience. He sources at flea markets, and from what I can see, the benefits of sourcing there is you have a wide variety of inventory. It's also negotiable, just like it is at garage sales with pricing, and it's a really good place to network and get that connection to have a consistent sourcing method. Like, he has people like put stuff aside for him. Like, that is a really cool connection to have. I think there's a couple of cons, which would be it's high competition. If you've got a really good flea market near you, you're probably going to have other resellers there looking for the same stuff you're looking for. It's weather dependent because a lot of them are outside. Most of flea markets are outside. I know that there are some that are indoors, and lucky them, but from what I've seen, a lot of flea markets are outside. And also, they're usually kind of crowded and overwhelming. So if that's not your vibe, then flea markets are probably not a good place for you to source. Next up, we have retail arbitrage. I'm talking about both brick and mortar and online. Retail arbitrage is basically a fancy word for buying low and selling high at a retailer. I've never tried this because I have no idea what the secret is to making it profitable, but someday, if I figure it out, I might dabble. I think the most obvious pro of this sourcing opportunity is you get brand new inventory. This allows you to price higher than you would for secondhand items. And if you're shopping inside a brick and mortar store, your items are gonna have barcodes, which makes it a lot easier to check your comps online. You can use a barcode scanning app and it'll pull up everything about that item. If you don't live in the middle of nowhere, retail arbitrage would also be a good opportunity for you because it's available everywhere and open 7 days a week. And if you're someone that's looking to scale your reselling business, it's a really good opportunity for repeatable inventory. You can get started with those multi-quantity listings. If you ever go to the clearance section of somewhere like a TJ Maxx, they usually have like a pair of shorts, and then they have that exact same pair of shorts on this clearance rack in different sizes. So you could grab those and make multi-quantity listings. And lastly, there's no cleaning required, which saves you a ton of time. And as you know, time is our most valuable asset as business owners. Retail arbitrage comes with one very obvious disadvantage and several not so obvious ones. The one obvious disadvantage is going to be it's a higher upfront cost. Even if the items that you buy are heavily clearance, you're still gonna be paying more upfront for the items than you would secondhand. Also, as I mentioned earlier, not everybody cares for resellers, and retail stores are no exception. There apparently are limited purchase quantities at some retailers. And if you've dabbled in retail arbitrage, I'd love to know your experience on this. I can't imagine that if I walked up to the checkout with 5 pairs of the same pants that they would tell me no. Like, but I'm not sure. It doesn't say limited purchase quantity anywhere in any of those stores that I have near me, so I'd be curious to know more about that. And another really strange con that you might not have thought of with retail arbitrage, I had to Google this. Even though I think it's generally helpful when a reseller posts their success with a certain item online, what this can cause is other resellers to go to the same store, buy the same item, and now you've got an oversaturation problem. So literally the viral videos can make retail arbitrage kind of a mess because everyone's just buying the same thing. If you find something that's high value by watching a influencer, chances are by the time you go to the store and try to look for it, it might not be there. So you really just have to know what you're doing. The very last item I have on the list today of sourcing methods that I haven't tried. This one I'm not even remotely close to getting the opportunity to try, but it's secret connections. And what I mean by that is, remember all of those sourcing methods I said, this is a great network opportunity. This is a great network opportunity. You need to use this as a networking opportunity. This is where you get the secret connections. And honestly, I think that secret connections is probably the best sourcing method that you can have if you get the opportunity to do so. But it does come with its cons. But let's talk about the pros first. The obvious pro is that you have exclusive access to inventory that you don't even have to source. You've got someone calling you up and saying, hey, I have X amount of whatever item. Can I send it to you? Or can you come pick it up? Yes, absolutely. You didn't even have to lift a finger for that, after you did have to lift a finger to make the connection in the first place. Also, a lot of times in these situations, the pricing is negotiable. It saves you time. And this has long-term stability potential. So you can probably rely on this person long-term to keep sending you inventory. As long as your connection is strong and you're keeping the relationship exclusive, you're basically covered. The obvious con to this sourcing method is it's hard to find. They're incredibly rare and you have to be a little bit fearless as a reseller. I literally had to Google some other disadvantages because I genuinely wasn't sure, but these ones actually make sense. If you have a special connection with somebody, there's a chance that it could dry up without any warning. So that's why I say you should not stop sourcing if you do have a regular connection, because you never know the person that you've connected with is going to stop sourcing themselves. And additionally, you might also feel an obligation to buy whenever they have something to offer, even if it doesn't fit your needs. At this point, if you say no too many times, you could lose that connection. I'm sure there's some wisdom in that situation that some of our more seasoned resellers could share with us. So if you're one of those rare resellers that has like an inside connection with somebody, would love to hear your experiences on that. How did you get this connection? Like, what was the random scenario where you told somebody you were a reseller and you suddenly got a cool connection? And how do you maintain the relationship? I want to know, because this is the kind of thing that I'm looking for in the future. I think it would be really cool to have someone just be like, here's some inventory for you. Anyways, that is all I have today for all of these sourcing methods, the pros and cons of every single one, my personal experiences with them, the pros and cons that I've experienced or that I had to look up. Literally, some of these I had to Google the pros and cons because I was like, are there more? I have no shame in that. I needed to know myself. If you found this video even a little bit helpful, I would love it if you could hit the like button, and feel free to subscribe if you haven't already. I post new videos every other Thursday, and I'll see you guys in a couple of weeks. Bye!